Who's the manager of your favorite major league team? Before you answer that question, you better double check.
You are Locked On MLB. Your daily MLB podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hello, baseball fans. Welcome to Locked On MLB, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day. This is the daily podcast. We talk about all of Major League Baseball. I am your host, Paul Francis Sullivan. Please call me Sully. I am an Emmy-nominated television producer who has been a baseball podcaster for well over a decade now, and we just finished our 5th full season as the host of the Locked On Podcast Network. Thanks so much for making it your first listen. And check out some of the other great shows on the Locked On Podcast Network, including Locked On Cubs, who are having an absolute field day. You can probably figure out why. And by the way, for those of you who listen every day, whether it's here on YouTube or if you're listening to us on your podcatcher, wherever you catch the show, if you're listening to us every day and you want to put a comment in, put a comment that says hashtag Everyday Sully, because I want to know who's listening every day here. And we're now going into the off season. And if today is any indication, this off season is going to be a lot of fun. Hey, as I said, follow us at Locked On MLB Pods on Twitter and Instagram. I'm your pal Sully. I'm at Sully Baseball on Twitter, Sully Baseball Podcast on Instagram. And today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more right now. New customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 moneyline bet. That's $150 if your team wins. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. Hey, let's talk a little bit quickly about the trivia question. I had a bunch of interesting guesses. The question was, which Hall of Famer has the most career Gold Gloves? Austin Lennon said Torrey Hunter. Someone else guessed Brooks Robinson. But Caleb Fox and several other people got it correct. And the answer is Greg Maddux. Greg Maddux has the most Gold Gloves as a pitcher in his time with the Cubs and with the Braves. Okay, let's talk a little bit about just was a tremendous carousel of moves of managers. Later in the episode, we're going to have Justin Lada from Locked On Guardians to talk about Stephen Vogt, who is taking over Cleveland after Terry Francona retired. But the shocking announcement came. Everything on the planet Earth seemed to be pointing towards Craig Counsell becoming the new manager of the Mets. David Stearns was the new general manager, worked with Craig Counsell since the Cretaceous period, and the Mets let go of Buck Showalter, the 2022 National League Manager of the Year, toodaloo, and there was a sort of back and forth with the Brewers saying, oh, I've got another big offer, sort of leaking, got another big offer, of which everyone in their moose, including you, thought that offer was from the Mets. And then came the strange announcement that the Mets hired Carlos Mendoza, who was the bench coach for Aaron Boone. Aaron Boone's lieutenants are getting hired before Bruce Bochy's. I'm just going to leave that there. Nothing against Carlos Mendoza, who I'm sure is a fine baseball mind. Roberto Kelly, Hensley Mullins, I don't get it. I don't get it. I never will get it. But with that announcement, it's like, what the heck is going on? And then the shocking announcement that Counsell is heading to the Cubs, that David Ross has been fired and Counsell has been inserted as the new manager. Let's take the first step first. If you go back, there was an episode that I posted with Millard Thomas on April 17th, 2023. April 17th of this year, I was calling for David Ross to be fired. I have nothing against David Ross. David Ross is a World Series champion Boston Red Sox player. I'm sure eventually he'll make a fine manager. But his main reason why he was inserted into the job with no prior experience except for a stint on Dancing with the Stars was because there had to be some form of olive branch to the fan to have some link back to the 2016 World Series title, as they systematically dismantled the team after Joe Madden skedaddled, and about after getting off to a solid start in 2021, they put 2 sticks of dynamite in the team and they blew it up. He was a placeholder. That's what he was. And there were many, many times that David Ross made dumb decisions, made bad managerial decisions, this, that, or the other thing that cost him a game here or there. And when you take a look at where the Cubs fit, and by the way, I called for his firing in April and I called for his firing in September when there was a couple of glaring games that he was like, "Are you even watching the game, David?" There have been at least 2 or 3 games throughout the year where you can point directly to his boneheaded mistakes costing him a game. And oh, yeah, by the way, they finished 1 game back of the eventual National League champion. He probably cost them a trip to the postseason. And if a team with sub 85 wins snuck into the World Series, probably there would have been fewer people angry about that if it were the Cubs as opposed to the Diamondbacks, even though I personally think the Diamondbacks is the better story. So I have no problem with letting David Ross go. I think they should have let him go. I think if you have a manager that's not working, why are you going to continue having them manage? But now Craig Counsell comes in, and Craig Counsell's been able throughout his career to squeeze a lot out of a lemon in Milwaukee. Now, granted, he has had some wonderful pitchers on his team, but he has also had not exactly the deepest pockets and not exactly the deepest teams, and yet consistently he has seen himself 92 wins last year, 95 wins in 2022, 96 wins in 2018, 86 wins in 2017. He has made trips to the postseason in what is it? 1, 2, 3, and was it 4 of the last 5 years? Is that what it is? I think it is. No, 5 of the last 6 years. Milwaukee has been in the postseason in one way, shape, or another. Now they've only got to the League Championship Series once. And remember, they had a lead in Game 7 of the National League Championship Series in 2018. They almost made it to the GD World Series. I digress. And this has been a phenomenal run for the Brewers, one that lacked a pennant, but you saw him getting the best out of his team. And if a manager is not going to win you a championship, at least he's not going to cost you a championship. And this is a no-brainer move. This is a move that the Cubs absolutely had to make. They had a chance to bring in a manager like this, and they had a chance to jettison Ross, who I'm sorry wasn't doing the job. Now, you got to listen to Locked On Cubs, because they are treating this like it's the 2016 parade all over again. And now there's an opening in Milwaukee. Would it be interesting if David Ross goes to that team? I don't know. I still believe Schultz should be the manager of the Padres, and who knows? Ross is going to end up somewhere, and he may wind up dusting himself off and becoming a fine manager. Remember, Terry Francona wet the bed initially as a manager, as did Joe Torre. Sometimes you need to stub your toe, and if I were a team, I would be looking at someone like, if I were a rebuilding club, I would look long and hard at David Ross, because maybe he's the right person to build back up with a team, or maybe a AAA manager, something along those lines. But I digress right now. The fact of the matter is the Cubs made a great choice, and one that also shows that they're for real in terms of wanting to put together a winner. They have some money to spend. Money has come off the books. They have a chance to put together some team, and they could find themselves in a position with the Cardinals in rebuild, and this has got to hurt the Brewers, certainly hurt the Brewers' mentality and psyche, that the Cubs must be looked upon as at least a legitimate contender in the National League Central, with some money to spend and the ability to put in a superstar and ignite the fan base. Are the Cubs now the front runners to land Shohei Ohtani? This whole time I thought he was going to stay in California, go up to 5 and play for the Dodgers, maybe the Giants, who are drooling to have a superstar on their team. would be the right fit. Maybe the Mariners, who are like, okay, to hell with all of you. We got to win a championship. We got to get into the World Series. Enough of this nonsense. I'm now thinking the Cubs. The Cubs could find themselves in a position to win a potentially easy division. Throw in an Ohtani, throw in a Counsell, and all of a sudden the Cubs are the team to beat in the National League Central. I think it's a phenomenal move for the Chicago Cubs. It's phenomenal. We'll see what happens with the Brewers, but at least it shows Cub fans that there's a change of mentality going on in the North Side. I also want to point out in our next segment, we are going to talk about the other big managerial move, which was in Cleveland. Justin Lada of Locked On Guardians is going to be there to talk about the fact that the Guardians are going from a Hall of Fame veteran manager, Francona, to someone who has managed as many games as me. Hey, that's Justin Lada of Locked On Cleveland Guardians. How you doing, man?
I'm fabulous. I can't wait to talk about managers.
Well, do you know what I can't wait to talk about? I can't talk about the NFL season because we should score early this NFL season with FanDuel. Did you know that's America's #1 sportsbook? Right now, new customers can get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 moneyline bet. That's $150 if your team wins. If you're thinking about joining FanDuel, there's no better time to get in on the action. The app is so easy to use. There's a wide range of betting options, including spreads, player props, over-unders, and more. So visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and kick off the NFL season. FanDuel is a proud sponsor of the National Football League. As I promised in segment 1, we are going to be talking a little bit about the other big manager. This has been a bunch of big managerial news coming around, and probably by the time we're finished doing this, the Padres will announce their manager. But Justin Lada, thanks for showing up. You are the host of Locked On Guardians. If you listen to Locked On Guardians, I'm Sully. I'm the host of Locked On MLB. How you doing, buddy?
Doing good. I'm finally glad that the carousel is over for most teams, and feels like we were waiting on this one forever. The Craig Counsell thing really threw a wrench into all this.
Oh, yeah. I mean, as we talked about in segment 1, that was just a whiplash. But the Cleveland, we all knew that they were going to get a new manager, not because of a firing, but because Terry Francona is riding his horse off into the sunset. The next time we see Francona, he is going to be getting ready to be making his Cooperstown speech. Deservedly so. Multiple manager of the year, multiple World Series championships, multiple pennants, remarkable career he had, and beloved figure in both Boston and in Cleveland. And huge shoes to fill in Cleveland. Now, when Francona left Boston, they initially brought in Bobby Valentine, which was I don't know if you ever saw images of the Hindenburg disaster, but it was eerily similar to Bobby V's. But then John Farrell eventually won a World Series, and Cora won a World Series, each in their first year as manager of the Red Sox, which maybe thinks the Guardians, old habits, the Guardians should hire Bobby Valentine. But
no,
Stephen Vogt's coming in. Before I hear your take on Stephen Vogt, which is a strange. I have no doubt he's a really good baseball mind. I mean, I never understood why it wasn't Sandy Alomar Jr.'s job to have after all those years in the coaching staff, and obviously a baseball IQ off the charts, super respected player and beloved Cleveland figure, and briefly was an interim manager. I never understood why it wasn't his job to lose, but evidently they have other thoughts. So the Stephen Vogt era has begun. Tell us your thoughts on this.
Sure. Really quickly, the Sandy Alomar thing, to your point there, he declined to interview this year. He's declined.
I didn't know that. Oh, okay. Well, there you go. That shows you what I know.
Yeah, he had not interviewed for any of those jobs in a while, so I think he's kind of comfortable where he is. We'll see where he lands. He's going to stay in the organization in some capacity. Maybe he has the role he's already in. not sure yet, but it will be interesting. There is expected to be a lot of continuity on Stephen Vogt's staff. I mean, like you said, this is a very big difference from Terry Francona in terms of experience. That guy came in, he found Cleveland. Cleveland didn't find him. They got very lucky that he forged relationships with the front office years ago. But Vogt's got a very similar personality. Players really like him. He's very well respected, not afraid to have tough conversations with players throughout his career. Obviously very funny, can relate to a lot of people. There's been a lot of praise. I mean, they're going to have a honeymoon phase like anybody, right? Right now, everyone's saying, oh, this guy's a great fit for the job. Everybody thought he was going to be a manager when his playing days were done. We'll see what happens on the field. He's very inexperienced. He only has 1 year of coaching in Major League Baseball. He was the Mariners bullpen coach last year and their quality control coach. I do think there's an interesting mix here. He does have a personality very reminiscent of Terry Francona, a very similar journey. I know Francona was a high draft pick and Vogt was not, but he ended up being a journeyman player. They both did, that were injured a lot and funny and whatnot. I do like that Vogt does have experience with the quality control situation. That does a role that lends itself to trying to delegate and explain information that comes from the front office, and a lot of times involves advanced stats and scouting. So that's a good component to have to the job. We'll see what happens. I mean, like I said, it's a lot of inexperience. He's going to have to grow into it. But Kevin Cash came from a similar situation as well. He was the Cleveland bullpen coach for 2 seasons under Francona before going to Tampa Bay, and he's become one of the best managers in Major League Baseball. Not the highest paid, not going to be the highest paid apparently, but pretty darn good. And is one more year of experience really a big deal in the bullpen coaching role? Cash had 2, Vogt had 1. We'll see how much that really matters. I tend to believe that, the player development and the coaching staff you have around you also makes a big impact. But this is certainly a big change and a critical one for the Guardians, who have had, one of the most respected managers in Major League Baseball history for the last 11 years. So we'll see how this goes.
It's interesting that I remember Vogt when he came up with the A's, and he was part of those, at least for me, impossible to root against A's teams of 2013, 2014, who made the playoffs with just the most bargain basement team you've ever seen, and made it to the playoffs and lost in those 2 years, 2013, 2014, just heartbreaking fashion if you're an A's fan, which is, for Oakland, it's kind of par for the course, kind of for Cleveland, it's par for the course. So maybe he has that little bit in him. And he came back to the A's in 2022, and he had a great big send-off. He had a home run to finish his career, and the place just gave him this rabid standing ovation. It was one of those things that if you didn't understand who he was or the role he played on those teams who were just beloved by Oakland fans in the early 2010s, go, why is this journeyman catcher getting a celebration like it's Frank Thomas retiring or something like that? But it's because he was just someone the fans took to heart and the team took to heart, and you just knew then that he was a special type of person who was going to be eventually a manager and everything. I have to say, I thought he was going to get some minor league experience or a few more years as a coach. I didn't think he was going to go retiring in 2022 and having the car keys in 2024. That's quite a big jump right there.
It is. I mean, I don't know if anybody expected it, but to go back to 2018 as well, he was hurt in 2018, and he actually ended up kind of serving in a coaching / apprentice role on the Brewers under Craig Counsell, of all people, ironically, who both were, potentially finals for Cleveland. So, he did kind of spend some time doing that. Like I said, the Kevin Cash thing. I mean, Kevin Cash was the Guardians or the Cleveland. They weren't the Guardians back then. The Cleveland bullpen coach for 2 seasons. So he did not have a lot of time. He didn't have any manager experience in the minors. I think we're seeing a lot of that these days, where guys aren't getting manager experience in the minors. I mean, I know there's probably mixed results in terms of how that goes. The one that really comes to mind is Aaron Boone. So, these things remain to be seen.
And there have been plenty of instances of managers who had no coaching or managerial experiences and then being given the car keys recently. And I mean, I think the results have been mainly negative. I mean, you haven't seen a tremendous amount of success when they hand it to a Walt Weiss, when they hand it to a Jason Tingler, they hand it to an Aaron Boone. Yes, I know the Yankees have made the playoffs several times under Boone, but he inherited a terrific team, that was one trash can away from going to the World Series in 2017. And I'm sorry. I mean, this is, I'm not, this is not going to be a Yankee bashing thing. And I think that Cashman is more to blame for the fall to mediocrity in the Bronx. But Boone has lasted longer than any manager in since the Yankees' first championship without winning a pennant himself in their history, going from Miller Huggins through Joe Girardi. This is the longest someone has gone without winning a pennant as a Yankee manager. He's beaten Buck Showalter in that, and we've seen the Yankees aren't getting better under his watch. But anyway, this is not Aaron Boone. I mean, there is an element though of Aaron Boone. Aaron Boone was very liked, good interview, good guy on the media, and so there was a sense that he was going to be this insanely likable manager. Obviously, Vogt is a great interview, very funny, and was an all-star, was a talented player. It wasn't like he wasn't this is not a Bob Uecker situation. But I mean, we're seeing the advantages of the ins and outs of having someone at least with minor league experience being you're seeing the last bunch of managers who have won the World Series. Obviously you have veterans like Bochy and Dusty Baker. Snitker was a minor league manager for a grillion years. Dave Roberts was on a bunch of coaching staffs and an interim manager before coming to Los Angeles. Dave Martinez was, part of Joe Maddon's squad. Whether or not they have a lot of managerial or coaching experiences, it feels like that's important, or he has to surround himself with a coaching staff filled with that kind of veteran quality.
Yeah, I would agree. I think, like I said before, I think that having the staff around you has as much of impact as the manager does. I mean, at the end of the day, the manager, it's not like, anything else in life and jobs is, can you get the people that you're managing and trying to herd together to buy into what you're saying? Can you get them to buy into what the direction you want to go in and how you want to achieve that direction? Yeah, there's certainly an element of needing to do that in the minors. But I think also in the minors, too, as a manager, like you're managing a team, but let's not forget in the minors, everything's about development. I think there are some organizations that do sort of prioritize winning in the minors. I think the Dodgers do. But most minor league, organizations are really prioritizing development in those players. So how much managing do you really get to do? You know what I mean? You're really just trying to keep the guys on a schedule and getting them to buy into what you're saying. There is an element to that as well. But you're being dictated who gets to play and how much they get to play, how many pitches they get to throw, which is not totally dissimilar to what it is at the major league level now. I mean, look at how the Rays run things with Kevin Cash. They run a lot of, games where they don't let guys go through the third time through the order. And then they rely a lot on information from the front office to dictate decisions. And you can, debate whether that's good or not. But that's kind of how the game is run sometimes. And Cleveland's not dissimilar in that way either. And yeah, who you surround yourself makes as much of a difference. And also, I think you also have to believe there's an element of talent in there too. This is a young Guardian squad, right? They're a very young team. So maybe they'll relate just as well to a young manager. I mean, Terry Francona has the ear of everybody, right? Because he's Terry Francona. Maybe they'll relate better as well to a young manager without the experience. At the end of the day, I think also it matters just how much talent you have, how far they're going to take you.
Well, look at, I've soft spot in my heart for any Cleveland team, and I really want to see the Guardians win a title because I don't know if you know this, but the fans deserve it. I'm
dying over here, man.
And I am for any generational moment. It was one of the reasons why I was happy for Texas is that it was for those fans who have been waiting for this. That's the moment they've been waiting for. And so, and as I said, when I had Bryce Patrick on, and I hope someday you experience this, the nanosecond a World Series is won, all of the past pain instantly goes away. It's instant. It just
We've got a
becomes
lot,
prologue.
Kelly. We've got a lot.
75
years.
Yes. As I pointed out, Cleveland's pain is so bad that even in the major league movies, which are fiction, they don't even win the World Series in those films. They have a voodoo right fielder, but let's not make this science fiction. They can't win the World Series. Hey, Justin, where can people follow your show?
You can find us anywhere podcasts are free, just like everywhere else in the Locked On Network, wherever you get podcasts, and on YouTube.
All right, man. Thanks for jumping on, and let the Stephen Vogt era begin. Thank you, Justin, for being part of the show. I have to say, there was a couple people have already been scratching their head over the Carlos Mendoza signing, and to me, I don't 100% understand it. I don't know much about him. Who knows? Maybe he's a phenomenal coach who's been buried in the Aaron Boone world. I think there are other terrific managers, not just Bruce Bochy, but also, you know, some of Dusty Baker's lieutenants, some of Joe Madden's old lieutenants, some of Dave Martinez's lieutenants. People in the farm who have been longtime baseball lifers, like the way that Snitker came up and has become a wonderful manager with Atlanta. I don't know. But I'll tell you one thing that I find interesting, that this is a move that, to me, the Mets bringing in a manager like Carlos Mendoza shows to me the Mets are going forward not with a win now mentality. If they're going for a win now mentality, they would bring in a veteran manager. They would have asked for the sun, the stars, the moon for Craig Counsell. They would be trying to bring in a Joe Madden. They bring in someone else with a big track record. Instead, they're bringing in Mendoza. Now, Mendoza is a baseball lifer, okay? And he is someone who has been, he's 43, so he's young. He's a lot younger than I am. And he has been a major league coach for the last 6 years. He's been a minor league coach. He's been a minor league manager. And he has been, and he's been the top lieutenant for Aaron Boone across the city. Here's where I think the Mets are onto something. This is a long-term move. This may be even a placeholder in a way, but he's certainly a young manager who probably has a really good baseball mind, who they're going to rebuild with. Remember, when the Mets traded away, not just Verlander and Scherzer, but Kana and a bunch of the other people on the team, they flooded their minor league system with a lot of young players. They cut bait. And they basically said, hey, the Mets' new ownership said, here's the deal. We went for it. We pushed all of our chips in. We got in aces. We put in big players. We made big acquisitions. Got in a high-profile manager. They went for it, trying to win that championship. Win that championship that has been eluding New York sports fans, unless you're a huge Major League Soccer fan, since 2012. That's right. I've made this point before. Unless you're a New York fan who your primary team is the Major League Soccer team, who I couldn't tell you now the name of that team for $1 million. If your main team are the Yankees, the Mets, the Giants, the Jets, the Islanders, the Rangers, the Devils, the Knicks, the Nets, even the New York Liberty, if any one of those teams are your primary team, you have been waiting over a decade for a title. If you're a Yankee fan, it's been a decade and a half. Almost exactly a decade and a half. If you're a Devils fan, it's been a while. If it's a Ranger fan, yeah, we all love 1994. Guess what? We're coming up on the 30th anniversary of that. Using the rule of 7, if you're 36 years old, you don't remember it. If you're an Islander fan or a Met fan, you've been waiting to the mid-'80s. And if you're a Jet fan or a Knick fan, forget about it. And if you're a Net fan, you have to go back to the ABA. Okay? Pre-merger. So New York hasn't exactly had an overflowing cup of championships. And the Mets are taking the road less traveled. Yeah, they tried to buy one quickly. It didn't work. Okay, we're going to build one. They're going to build one from the ground up. They're going to build one by flooding their farm system with young players. They're using the method that the Astros and the Cubs did, which is trade away your veterans and make your farm system flush with young talent. And now they have a young manager. They're probably not going to win Piddly-Poo in 2024, but I bet you anything, you're going to start seeing some of their young players showing up. I bet you anything, Met fans are going to perk up. So what's going on here? What's going on here? With the idea being they're not just going to go for it for 1 year like they did this year, but they're going to build a team kind of the way the Braves did, kind of the way the Astros did, kind of the way the Cubs did. And it may only yield one title, but it will bring a team full of young players that New Yorkers will embrace like crazy. And part of that might be a young manager. If you're a Met fan, you should be looking at this team going, okay, I've been waiting a while. I'll give you a couple of years to put something together. And you've seen if you draft correctly, if you put your team together correctly, you can get to the promised land pretty quickly. Look at how fast the Diamondbacks did it. Was it a fluke? Maybe, but that's the way it's set up. Look at how fast things turned around for Houston and Chicago. Were there big dips? Yeah. And then what happened? The Cubs won a championship and the Astros discovered there was a trash can. By the way, I'll get to all the comments about the villainy there's way too much to talk about. This is not a move for now. This is a move for the new great Mets team that is going to rise like a phoenix and maybe get to the World Series as fast as the team from Phoenix. Imagine if that was a Cub team in the World Series against the Rangers, or a Met team with those young players like Carroll and Thomas and Ketel Marte. Imagine them wearing Met uniforms. Trying to tell me that wouldn't be the most popular team in the city right now? Trying to tell me that they wouldn't be falling over themselves? By the way, the Diamondbacks are here to stay. They went to the World Series this year and have piles of talent in their farm system. They're going to be around for a few years. And maybe the Mets are saying, that would be intriguing. We tried the buying a quick championship. Now let's build a beloved team. And maybe a young manager is the way to go. Maybe Mendoza will be dismissed with a great manager is available in 2 or 3 years. Or maybe Mendoza is going to turn out to be a great manager himself. This is a long-term move, and I like that the Mets are doing it. It may be aggravating for Met fans in 2024 and 2025, but if they wake up in 2026 and say, oh, wow, well, look at us, those 2 years, they'll have gone by really quickly. Now, let's talk about the trivia question for today. Trivia question is this. There have been several managers, including most recently Alex Cora, who have won a World Series in their very first year as a major league manager. Here's the trivia question. Who's the only manager in baseball history to win the World Series in his first and second year? Rookie manager wins the World Series in their rookie year and wins it again their second year. Only one manager in baseball history has ever done that. And I know my mom knows the answer to this. So send your answers to the YouTube page and also Locked On MLB Pods on Twitter and Instagram. I'm your pal Sully at Sully Baseball on Twitter, Sully Baseball Podcast on Instagram. Thank you, Justin Lada, for appearing on the show. This has been Locked On MLB. I recorded this on the 6th of November, probably dropping on the 7th. I don't know. Neither do you. I am your host, Paul Francis Sullivan. Please call me Sully.